and welcome to my YouTube channel, Reading Little Blue Books Out Loud. This just happens to be a little blue book. It is Little Blue Book number 595, and it is titled The Happy Hypocrite, written by Max Beerbohm, somewhere in the 1920s. And this is part 3, and we left off the top of page 42, so here we go. A lonely place, and does my heart good to depart from it. "We are going to be married this afternoon in the town," said Lord George. "We will come straight back to our home." "May you be happy," replied the woodsman. "You'll find me gone when you come." "Are you very rich?" Jenny asked. "Ought you to have bought the cottage for that great price?" "Would you love me as much if I were quite poor, little Jenny?" he asked her after a pause. "I did not know you were rich when I saw you across the stream," she said. And in his heart Lord George made a good resolve. He would put away from him all his worldly possessions, all the money he had won at the clubs, fairly or foully, all that hideous accretion of gold guineas he would distribute among the comrades he had impoverished. As he walked, with the sweet and trusted girl at his side, the vague record of his infamy assailed him, and a look of pain shot behind his smooth mask. He would atone. He would shun no sacrifice that might cleanse his soul. All his fortune he would put from him. Follard Chase he would give back to Sir Follard. He would sell his house at St. James Square. He would keep some little part of it, his patrimony enough for him in the wood with Jenny, but no more. "I shall be quite poor, Jenny," he said. And they talked of the things that lovers love to talk of. How happy they would be together, and how economical. As they were passing Herbert's pastry shop, which is, as my little readers know, still stands in Kensington, Jenny looked up rather wistfully into her lover's aesthetic face. Should you think me greedy," she asked him, "if I want a bun? They have beautiful buns here." Buns? The simple word started latent memories of his childhood. Jenny was only a child, after all. Buns? He had forgotten what they were like. And, as they looked at the piles of variegated cakes in the window, he said to her, "Which are buns, Jenny? I should like to have one too." "I am almost afraid of you," she said. "You must despise me so. Are you so good that you deny yourself all the vanity and pleasure that most people love? It is wonderful not to know what buns are. The round, brown, shiny cakes with little raisins in them are buns." So he bought 2 beautiful buns, and they sat together in the shop, eating them. Jenny bit hers rather diffidently, but was reassured when he said that they must have buns very often in the cottage. Yes. He, the famous toper and gourmet of St. James, relished this homely fare. As it passed through the insensible lips of his mask to the palate, he seemed to rise from the consumption of his bun a better man. But there was no time to lose now. It was already past 2 o'clock, so he got a chaise from the inn opposite the pastry shop, and they were swiftly driven to Doctors' Commons. There he purchased a special license. When the clerk asked him to write his name upon it, he hesitated. What name should he assume? Under a mask he had wooed this girl. Under an unreal name he must make her his bride. He loathed, boy, that's a strange word to say, himself for a trickster. He had vilely stolen from her the love she would not give him. Even now, would he not confess himself the man whose face had frightened her, and go his way? And yet, surely, it was not just that. He, whose soul was transfigured, should bear his old name. Surely George Hell was dead, and his name had died with him. So he dipped a pen in the ink and wrote George Heaven, for want of a better name, and Jenny wrote Jenny Mere beneath it. An hour later, they were married, according to the simple rites of a dear little registry office in Covent Garden. And in the cool evening, they went home. In the cottage that had been the woodsman, they had a wonderful honeymoon. No king and queen in any palace of gold were happier than they. Turn the page. For them, their tiny cottage was a palace, and the flowers that filled the garden were their courtiers. Long and careless and full of kisses were the days of their reign. Sometimes, indeed, strange dreams troubled Lord George's sleep. Once he dreamt that he stood knocking and knocking at the great door of a castle. It was a bitter night. The frost enveloped him. No one came. Presently he heard a footstep in the hall beyond, and a pair of frightened eyes peered at him through the grill. Jenny was scanning his face. She would not open to him. With tears and wild words he besought her, but she would not open to him. Then, very stealthily, he crept round the castle and found a small casement in the wall. It was open. He climbed swiftly, quietly through it. In the darkness of the room, someone ran to him and kissed him gladly. It was Jenny. With a cry of joy and shame, he awoke. By his side lay Jenny, sleeping like a little child. After all, what was a dream to him? It could not mar the reality of his daily happiness. He cherished his true penance for the evil he had done in the past. The past. That was indeed the only unreal thing that lingered in his life. Every day its substance dwindled, grew fainter yet, as he lived his rustic honeymoon. Had he not utterly put it from him? Had he not, a few hours after his marriage, written to his lawyer, declaring solemnly that he, Lord George Hell, had forsworn the world, that he was where no man would find him, that he desired all his worldly goods to be distributed, thus and thus, among these and those of his companions. By this testament he had verily atoned for the wrong he had done, had made himself dead indeed to the world. No address had he written upon his document, though its injunctions were final and binding. It could betray no clue of his hiding place. For the rest, no one would care to seek him out. He, who had done no good to human creature, would pass unmourned out of memory. The clubs, doubtless, would laugh and puzzle over his strange recantations, envious of whomever he had enriched. They would say 'twas a good riddance of a rogue, and soon forget him. But she, whose prime patron he had been, who had loved him in her vile fashion, La Gambogi, would she forget him easily like the rest? As the sweet days went by, her spectre also grew fainter and less formidable. She knew his mask indeed, but how should she find him in the cottage near Kensington? Divia Dalcidio Latabraurum? I'm not sure why they do Latin in this. He was safe hidden with his bride. As for the Italian, she might search and search, or had forgotten him in the arms of another lover. Yes, few and faint become the blemishes of his honeymoon. At first he had felt that his waxen mask, though it had been the means of his happiness, was rather a barrier twixt him and his bride, though it was sweet to kiss her through it, to look at her through it with loving eyes. Yet there were times when it incommoded him with its mockery. Could he but put it from him? Yet that, of course, could not be. He must wear it all of his life. And so, as days went by, he grew reconciled to his mask. No longer did he feel it jarring on his face. It seemed to become a very part of him, and for all its rigid material, it did forsooth express the one emotion that filled him, true love. The face for whose sake Jenny gave him her heart could not but be dear to this George Heaven also. Every day chastened him with its joy. They lived a very simple life, he and Jenny. They rose betimes like the birds for whose goodness they both had so sincere a love. Bread and honey and little strawberries were their morning fare, and in the evening they had seed cake and dewberry wine. Jenny herself made the wine, and her husband drank it, in strict moderation, never more than 2 glasses. He thought it tasted far better than the Regent's sherry brandy, or the Tokay at Brooks. Of these treasured topes he had, indeed, nearly forgotten the taste. The wine made from wild berries by his little bride was august enough for his palate. Sometimes, after they had dined thus, he would play the flute to her upon the moonlight lawn, or tell her of the great daisy chain he was going to make for her on the morrow, or sit silently by her side, listening to the nightingale till bedtime. So admirably simple were their days. One morning, as he was helping Jenny to water the flowers, he said to her suddenly, "Sweetheart, we had forgotten." "What was there we should forget?" asked Jenny, looking up from her task. "'Tis the mensversary of our wedding," her husband answered gravely. "We must not let it pass without some celebration." "No, indeed," she said. "We must not. What shall we do?" Between them they decided upon an unusual feast. They would go into the village and buy a bag of beautiful buns and eat them in the afternoon. So soon, then, as all the flowers were watered, they set forth to Herbert's shop, bought the buns, and returned home in very high spirits. George bearing a paper bag that held no less than 12 of the wholesome delicacies. Under the plane tree on the lawn, Jenny sat her down, and George stretched himself at her feet. They were loth to enjoy their feast too soon. They dallied in childish anticipation. On the little rustic table, Jenny built up the buns, one above another, till they looked like a tall pagoda. When very gingerly she had crowned the structure with the 12th bun, her husband looked on with admiration. She clapped her hands and danced about it. She laughed so loudly, for though she was only 16 years old, she had a great sense of humor, that the table shook, and alas, the pagoda tottered and fell to the lawn. Swift as a kitten, Jenny chased the buns as they rolled hither and thither over the grass, catching them deftly with her hand. Then she came back, flushed and merry under her tumbled hair, with her arm full of buns. She began to put them back into the paper bag. "Dear husband," she said, looking down to him, "why do not you two smile at my folly? Why do not you too smile at my folly?" Well, "Your grave face rebukes me. Smile, or I shall think I vex you. Please smile a little." But the mask could not smile, of course. It was made for a mirror of true love, and it was grave and immovable. "I am very much amused, dear," he said, "at this fall of the buns, but my lips do not curve to a smile. Love of you has bound them in a spell. But I can laugh, though I love you. I do not understand." And she wondered. He took her hand in his and stroked it gently, wishing it were possible to smile. Some day, perhaps, she would tire of his monotonous gravity, this rigid sweetness. It was not strange that she should long for a little facial expression. They sat silently. "Jenny, what is it?" he whispered suddenly. For Jenny, with wide open eyes, was gazing over his head across the lawn. "Why do you look frightened?" "There is a strange woman smiling at me across the palings," she said. "I do not know her." Her husband's heart sank. Somehow he dared not turn his head to the intruder. "She is nodding to me," said Jenny. "I think she is foreign, for she has an evil face." "Do not notice her," he whispered. "Does she look evil?" "Very evil and very dark. She has a pink parasol. Her teeth are like ivory." "Do not notice her. Think. It is the mensversary of our wedding, dear." "I wish she would not smile at me. Her eyes are like bright blots of ink. Let us eat our beautiful buns." "Oh, she is coming in." George heard the latch of the gate jar. "Forbid her to come in," whispered Jenny. "I am afraid." He heard the jar of heels on the gravel path. Yet he dared not turn. Only he clasped Jenny's hand more tightly as he waited for the voice. It was La Gambogie's. "Pray, pardon me. I could not mistake the back of so old a friend." With the courage of despair, George turned and faced the woman. Even she smiled, though his face has changed marvelously. Madame, he said, rising to his full height and stepping between her and his bride, begone, I command you, from this garden. I do not see what good it is to be served by the renewal of our acquaintance. Acquaintance, murmured La Gambogi, with an arch of her beetle brows. Surely we were friends, rather, nor is my esteem for you so dead that I would crave estrangement. Madame, rejoined Lord George with a tremor in his voice, you see me happy, living very peacefully with my bride, to whom, I beseech you, old friend, present me. I would not, he said hotly, desecrate her sweet name by speaking it with so infamous a name as yours. Your coroller hurts me, old friend, said La Gambogi, sinking composedly upon the garden seat and smoothing the silk of her skirts. Jenny, said George, then do you retire, pending this lady's departure, to the cottage. But Jenny clung to his arm. I was less frightened at your side, she whispered. Do not send me away. Suffer her pretty presence, said La Gambogi. Indeed, I am come this long way from the heart of the town, that I may see her, no less than you, George. My wish is only to befriend her. Why should she not set you a mannerly example, giving me welcome? Come and sit by me, little bride, for I have things to tell you. Though you reject my friendship, give me at least the slightest courtesy of audience. I will not detain you over long. We'll be gone very soon. Are you expecting guests, George? She eyed the couple critically. Your wife's mask, she said, is even better than yours. What does she mean? Whispered Jenny. Oh, send her away. Serpent, was all George could say. Crawl from our Eden, ere you're poisoned with your venom its fairest denizen. La Gambogi rose. Even my pride, she cried passionately, knows certain bounds. I have been forbearing, but in my zeal for friendship, I will not be called serpent. I will indeed be gone from this rude place. Yet ere I go, there is a boon I will deign to beg. Show me, oh show me, but once again, the dear face I have so often caressed, the lips that were dear to me. George started back. What does she mean? Whispered Jenny. In memory of our old friendship, continued La Gambogi, grant me this piteous favor. Show me your own face, but for one instant, and I vow I will never again remind you that I live. Intercede for me, little bride. Bid him unmask for me. You have more authority over him than I. Doff his mask with your own Oroxus fingers. What does she mean? Was the refrain of poor Jenny. If, said George, gazing sternly at his traitress, you do not go now, of your own will, I must drive you, man though I am, violently from the garden. Doff your mask, and I am gone. George made a step of menace towards her. False saint, she shrieked. Then I will unmask you. Like a panther, she sprung upon him and clawed at his waxen cheeks. Jenny fell back, mute with terror. Vainly did George try to free himself from his assailant, who writhed round and round him, clawing at what Jenny fancied to be his face. With a wild cry, Jenny fell upon the furious creature and tried with all her childish strength to release her dear one. The combatives swayed to and fro, a revulsive trinity. There was a loud pop, as though some great cork had been withdrawn, and La Gambogi recoiled. She had torn away the mask. It lay before her upon the lawn, upturned to the sky. George stood motionless. La Gambogi stared up into his face, and her dark flush died swiftly away. For there, staring back at her, was the man she had unmasked. Below, his face was even as his mask had been, line for line, feature for feature. It was the same. 'Twas a saint's face. Madame, he said, in the calm voice of despair, your cheek may well blanch when you regard the ruin you have brought upon me. Nevertheless do I pardon you. The gods have avenged through you the imposture I wrought upon one who was dear to me. For that unpardonable sin I am punished. As for my poor bride, whose love I stole by the means of that waxen semblance, of her I cannot ask pardon. Ah, Jenny, Jenny, do not look at me. Turn your eyes from the foul reality that I dissembled. He shuddered and hid his face in his hands. Do not look at me. I will go from the garden, nor will I ever curse you with the odious spectacle of my face. Forget me. Forget me. But as he turned to go, Jenny laid her hands upon his wrist and besought him that he would look at her. For indeed, she said, I am bewildered by your strange words. Why did you woo me under a mask? And why do you imagine I could love you less dearly seeing your own face? He looked into her eyes. On their violet surface, he saw the tiny reflection of his own face. He was filled with joy and wonder. Surely, said Jenny, your face is even dearer to me, even fairer than the semblance that hid it and deceived me. I am not angry. 'Twas well that you veiled from me the full glory of your face, for indeed I was not worthy to behold it too soon. For I am your wife now. Let me look always at your own face. Let the time of my probation be over. Kiss me with your own lips. So he took her in his hands, and though she had been a little child, and kissed her with his own lips, she put her arms round his neck, and he was happier than he had ever been. They were alone in the garden now, nor lay the mask any longer upon the lawn, for the sun had melted it. And that is the end of the story, The Happy Hypocrite, written by Max Beerbohm, Little Blue Book number 595. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the next book.